Okay. All right. So this is our second session of four, Unconditional Love. And so last time we we discovered that there was something unique, many things unique about Krishna prema, the transcendental spiritual type of unconditional love. Because sometimes it's described as unconditional. Prabhupada does it is without conditions, and but it differs from what we experience here, in our day to day life. That usually what we call unconditional love here is, it's less conditional, not completely unconditional. It's very difficult to reach that level, right? So there's relative unconditionality, and so it says that with Krishna, for one thing, it's fully reciprocated, right? Krishna and the devotees, if we have love for Krishna, then we are guaranteed that Krishna has love for us. So that's even a greater rarity. To have relatively unconditional love in this world and to have it reciprocated is even more rare. And then so it's fully reciprocated and completely spontaneous, which means it just springs forth because of the other being. Like with Krishna, it means it's his all attractiveness just makes it just pour out of people. There's an attachment there, and he's attached to us, and that's which means there's not the desire aspect. Usually, as in the material world, love has kind of dual concepts. There may be some real love there, maybe even a lot of it, but there's also oftentimes at least some a level of desire mixed in. And so this when it's spontaneous, completely spontaneous, there's no selfish desire there, and it's unbreakable. That's what Prabhupada mentions is that was one bhajan that he has a purport for. And he says that with Radha Krishna, it never breaks. He says, even when there seems to be cause, it never breaks. He said that's different from any of the love that we have here. Okay. So we're going to look at it a little bit more closely. Um, and Krishna prema is something that's unusual, rare, precious, extraordinary, wonderful, even in the spiritual world. And I'm going to give you an interesting verse here. This comes spoken by Kapila Dev in his talk on bhakti, and so it's a famous verse. It's quoted in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu because it really um, helps to define bhakti. The previous verse talks about how the devotee's affection towards Krishna flows like the Ganga. We'll see actually Prabhupada quoting that in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. So this is a verse after that. And this is a pure devotee does not accept any kind of liberation. Salokya, sarshti, samipya, sarupya, or ekatva, even though they are offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, the interesting thing about this verse is you'll notice that there's a portion of it that's translated in the word for word, but not translated in the smooth translation. And it's the three first words in the last line, Vina mat sevanam. And the word for word says Vina without, and mat mai means Krishna's, or sevanam without my service. And so so it says the devotees don't accept any of these liberations if it doesn't include service. And Prabhupada doesn't happen to translate that. I'm not sure he wanted us to know that you can go to the spiritual world without having service. But it's possible, actually, to do that. And actually, according to Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, it's a lot easier than we might think it would be. And but the devotees they have only Krishna, they have only the desire for Krishna service, and wherever that is, they would prefer to have that if than even liberation without it. That would just seem meaningless to them. So let's look here at this is Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur's commentary on Bhagavad Gita 7:16. It's for the four types of devotees: the people that surrender, the pious people that surrender to Krishna. And he says the results of the two types of pradhana, he calls it pradhana bhuta bhakti. He says that it just means that a bhakti that has where there's bhakti where bhakti is predominant. It's like you can have karma mishra, you can have karma yoga, or you can have jnana that has a little bhakti in it, or karma that has a little bhakti in it. So there's a bhakti there, but the predominating thing is either karma or jnana. So that's a different kind. So he says, because here we're going to have a mixed bhakti in this one, but it's the bhakti is going to be predominant. Okay, so that's what this pradhana bhuta, that's just his technical term for that. But he says amongst these four, he says these are all four of these. He says the first three are karma mishra bhakti or sakama bhakti. So they have desires, and it means mixed with karma, mixed with desires. So that means, then he says, the result of this bhakti is attainment of their respective desires, the deliverance from suffering, right? There's the person who's needs a relief from something. Attainment, he says the person who's inquisitive, this is how he puts it, the attainment of scriptural knowledge with materialistic method. That's how he does for the inquisitive person. But then he says, and the gain of material benefits. So there's somebody that desires something, somebody that wants to get rid of some misery, right? They approach Krishna, right? So and then he says that they achieve their desires when they worship Krishna. But it's a motivated, right? It's not selfless service. It's motivated. It's mixed with these desires. And he says, and after that, because of the superior nature of their object of worship, Krishna, those devotees attained liberation in the form of salokya, attaining the same planet with predominance of happiness and powers, sukha and aishvarya. And there is no fall down, as in the case of exhausting enjoyment in svarga as a result of karma. And he quotes Bhagavad Gita 9:25. It says, "It will be said, those who worship me come to me." But they're not going to have service. And we can see that even more clearly. He says there's just sukha, they're absorbing the happiness and the powers or opulence of the material world. They're enjoying that. And they obviously they know it's Krishna's place and they're grateful to him, but there's not service. It's because he says you'll see it's even more clearly. He says he says the fourth one, the jnani. He says that's jnana mishra bhakti. And so he says that this is superior to the other three types, the ones that he talked about before. They get shantarati, so they get bhava at least, so they have some real feeling for Krishna, right? But shanta means there's such an awareness of Krishna's powers. He says examples are Sanaka and others. Sometimes, because of exceptional mercy of the Lord and his devotee, the results of Jnana Mishra Bhakti is a higher position in prema, as the case of Shukadeva. That takes special mercy. So generally, they have Shantarati, and that doesn't include service, as we'll see here. Prabhupada mentions here from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. He says Prabhupada says there are 5 transcendental rasas or mellows. The initial stage is called Shantarati, wherein one who is liberated from material contamination appreciates the greatness of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One who attains this stage does not exactly engage in the transcendental loving service of the Lord, for this is the neutral stage. And this is even when you have bhava, or when you have real feeling for the Lord. So the previous ones don't even have that. Because what happens here is there's the overwhelming knowledge of Krishna's opulence, his power, and his difference from you. So you do not feel that. What can you do for Krishna? You can't feel that he needs any service. What can you do for him? It's just, wow, Krishna's amazing. And so you're grateful to him. You have feeling for him, Shantarati. For those the Jnanamish ones, there's some affection, but there's you can't see why there's any point in serving him. He's everything. What can you do? He is everything. He controls everything. What can you do for him? That's your mentality. Mm-hmm. And so you have people in the spiritual world who have that kind of situation, right? And so you can be. That's why it specifies in that first verse that they don't accept those liberation without service, because it's possible without it. And then Prabhupada gives some examples. He says examples of Shanta Bhaktas, or devotees in the neutral stage, are the sages known as the 9 Yogendras, Kavi Havi Antariksha Prabhuda Pipalayana Avihotra Durivida Durumala Chamasa and Karavajan. The four Kumaras, Sanaka, Sanandana, Sanat Kumara, and Sanatan, are also examples of this stage. So in the purport to that same verse, Prabhupada it does something kind of interesting. He says, Lord Chaitanya teaches us how to execute pure devotional service. This is the verse that says, without my service, execute pure devotional service out of spontaneous love for the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In the Shikshastaka, he prays to the Lord, O Lord, I do not wish to gain from you any wealth, nor do I wish to have a beautiful wife, nor do I wish to have many followers. All I want from you is that in life after life, I remain a pure devotee at your lotus feet. Now, the interesting thing, particularly interesting thing about this is this verse of the Shikshastakam, the fourth verse, is actually represents the stage of ruchi. So this isn't prema, this isn't bhava, this is part of sadhana. Mm-hmm. But Prabhupada talks about spontaneity there because there's taste, right? And so at that stage, like at the stage most of us are in, it's called anishtita bhakti. It's unsteady. So we have a taste for Krishna, and an attraction for him, and we still have remaining material tastes that have been that we've been carrying with us for many lifetimes. And so sometimes those are competing with one another. And so therefore it's a little unsteady. It says our Krishna consciousness goes up and our material tastes go down. Our material tastes go up and our Krishna consciousness goes down. They're inversely proportional. And so that's why it's unsteady, And then as the connection deepens, there's the stage of nishta or steadiness, where there still may be material attractions, but it's so clear to us that even though they may still be attractive to us, that Krishna consciousness is better. So there's kind of a deepening wisdom and buddhi understanding there. And at that stage, you're able to at that point, the all attractiveness of Krishna begins to manifest more strongly. Because when we're in the unsteady stage, we're remembering Krishna, we're forgetting Krishna. Remembering Krishna. Actually, it says, Rupa Goswami says, right, the purpose of sadhana is to remember Krishna and never forget him. And it seems kind of redundant. I want that to say always remember Krishna, but it makes sense to me because sometimes we remember. And then if we remember, we're not supposed to forget. But when we do forget, right, then we're supposed to remember again. So we find ourselves on both sides of that equation, remembering and trying not to forget, and also forgetting and trying to remember. So it makes sense that he says both of those things, right? So when you're doing that, it's like turning a light off and turning a light on. But when it stays on, then you become much more fixed on your realization of Krishna, and this all attractiveness starts to. Now we get moments of taste, we call it the higher taste. There's taste even before the stage of ruchi. We feel that connection with Krishna. We feel that it happens, but then it goes away because we switch off again and we forget him. So in the stage of nishta, you don't turn off, and so that attraction begins to slowly build. And then at the stage of ruchi, which Prabhupada is talking about here, that fourth verse is a shikshastakam, that means that taste, that connection with Krishna is deep and continuous. So we have taste even from the very beginning, but it can't be called ruchi until it's deep and continuous. And in that case, it says, right, when material desires are presented to yourself, you go, I don't want that. I don't want that. It's like almost ridiculous at that point. In Nishta, you see it's still attractive, but this is more important. and in Ruchi, it's like, forget about it. You don't want this, you don't want that, you don't want wealth, you don't want people, you don't want you don't want any of the things that are offered by the Vedas. You don't want any of that. And you're not interested. So because there's a spontaneous desire to serve. And there's what's called a little bit of raga, a little bit of attachment there to Krishna, like, because his all attractiveness is manifested in your life. Okay? So Prabhupada says here that there's a similarity. And so this is going to be important when we discuss a little bit how we can put ourselves on track towards, towards this highest type of love, unconditional love. What will help us to move from our present position there? As you see, even Prabhupada is talking about spontaneity here, even in Ruchi. He says there is a similarity between the prayers of Lord Chaitanya and the statements of Srimad Bhagavatam. Lord Chaitanya prays in life after life, indicating that the devotee does not even desire the cessation of birth and death. The yogis and empiric philosophers desire cessation of the process of birth and death, but the devotee is satisfied even to remain in this material world and execute devotional service. It doesn't mean that they won't go there, right? But that's not why they're serving. And if they have a choice between going to the spiritual world and not serving and serving right here, they're going to serve right here. There isn't anything else that compares to it. Right? So that's how it goes. So there's a certain enthusiasm, a raga. We'll see that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says in his Madhurya Kadambani that the first two leaves of the bhakti creeper, when it sprouts, he says that there's, the top of the leaf is smooth, and the underneath of the leaf has the vein, so it's a little rough. And so he says that the underside of the leaf, that's the realm of the king called Vaidhi. Right? They're just having a preponderance of a knowledge of Krishna's power, and following the rules on the basis of that Krishna is the Lord and it's my place to serve him. And then he says the top leaf is smooth, and that's the place of the king called Raga, where there's actual attachment to Krishna. So that's smoother, and that can start early on. And so we'll find out there's kind of a two track. There's Krishna's grandeur, power, and majesty, and there's Krishna's sweetness, and we need to interact with both of them actually to be able to move to spontaneity. Both of them are required. We'll find that out. So but that's something we'll discuss in the last couple of classes more. Yeah, he's in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. Prabhupada explains further. He refers to the previous verse also. He says, a pure devotee accepts the transcendental loving service of the Lord, but rejects all kinds of liberation for his personal sense gratification. This is stated by Lord Kapila Dev in the verse we just talked about, in his explanation of the nature of pure devotional service. As soon as a pure devotee hears the glories and transcendental qualities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is seated in everyone's heart, his mind at once flows towards the Lord, just as the waters of the Ganges flow down toward the sea. Such spontaneous attraction of the devotee's mind to the service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead signifies pure devotional service. So, as we know, for most of us, it doesn't happen immediately, but it's something that we can cultivate, right? And we have felt that attraction before. So this is important. So we're looking for something that's spontaneous. So there's the understanding of Krishna as God and us as our servant. But then there has to, in order for us to move towards the kind of prema we're looking for, we want to bring some spontaneity into it. So we'll talk about that later. So now, even in the spiritual world where you have devotees serving the Lord, and even where you have people serving Krishna, the devotees of Vrindavan stand out. So you have devotees of Krishna's in Mathura, and you have them in Hastinapur, the Pandavas, you have them in Dwarka. But even amongst all those persons that have love, prema for Krishna, the ones in Vrindavan stand out, and because of the high level of spontaneity there. And so here you can this comes from the Krishna book. I mean, and it demonstrates this nicely. While describing the uncommon activities of Krishna before Uddhava, when Uddhava was sent from Dwarka with a message for the gopis, he met with Nanda and Yashoda. And so Nanda Maharaj says, while describing the uncommon activities of Krishna to Uddhava, really, Nanda Maharaj gradually became overwhelmed and could no longer speak. As for Mother Yashoda, she sat by the side of her husband and heard the pastimes of Krishna without speaking. She simply cried incessantly, and milk poured from her breasts. When Uddhava saw Maharaj Nanda and Yashoda so extraordinarily overwhelmed with thoughts of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and when he experienced their extraordinary affection for him, he also became overwhelmed and spoke as follows: My dear Yashoda and Nanda Maharaj, you are most respectable among human beings because no one but you can meditate in such transcendental ecstasy. So Uddhava, he's one of the dearest friends of Krishna in Dwarka. He's always with Krishna. It says when the Narad Muni in the Brihat Bhagavatam is trying to find the highest devotees. He keeps going from one type of devotee to another, and they say, "Oh no, Krishna doesn't care for me that much, but he really cares for these other people." So when he goes to the people in Dwarka, they say, "Yeah, but I mean, sometimes he comes to meet us in the little meeting house, and sometimes he's gone away." But he says Uddhava is always with him. So Uddhava is the best devotee. That's how they see. So Krishna and even Uddhava looks like Krishna. So they're just like they're so thick and close together, so tight. Right. But when he sees them, when he goes, so Krishna sends him to Vrindavan to experience Vrindavan. So even when he meets Nanda and Yashoda, he's blown away. This is a whole different level of love. Right, he can see it. So he's a person who can understand. He has high levels of love for Krishna, and so when he's blown away, it means something. And then Uddhava continued. He says, this is later on. He says, the supreme benediction attained by the gopis, in spite of their being born in the families of cowherd men, was never attained even by the goddess of fortune herself, Lakshmi, and certainly not by the denizens of heaven, although the bodily scent of women there is exactly like the scent of the lotus. The gopis are so fortunate that during the Rasa Lila, Krishna personally embraced them with his arms and kissed them face to face. Certainly it is not possible for any woman in the three worlds to achieve this except the gopis. And therefore he says, therefore I wish to take birth as one of the plants or creepers in Vrindavan, who are so fortunate that the gopis trampled them. The gopis have so lovingly served Krishna, Mukunda himself, the giver of liberation, who is searched after by great sages and saintly persons. For his sake, they left everything, their families, their children, their friends, their homes, and all worldly connections. He was hoping that they would, step on him as a creeper, and he would get the dust of their feet. So that's how what he felt about the love of the residents of Vrindavan. It's a whole nother level, right, that happens there. And it's really this particular type of love that's Krishna's real purpose in living and being who he is. And so we're going to go back a little bit. These are excerpts from a lecture Prabhupada gave in 1966 in 26 Second Avenue, very early on in the Krishna consciousness movement. March 9th, 1966, New York, one of the earliest recordings. And he said there were, of course, a lot of people that were impersonalists at that time. And so he says, that means we are all individual beings. We are individual constitutionally. God is the Father or Creator or whatever, or the source of all life or source of our existence. Whatever you like, you can say. So we have been created in that way. And he quotes the Upanishad, Eko Bahusyam. God has become many. He says, this is also a version of the Vedas, that many, all these many, he says, we are also God. Just like the fire diffuses its sparks, the sparks coming out of the fire, they are all part and parcel of the fire. Similarly, we are all parts and parcels of the Supreme. Okay, so he explains that's nice. But now he asks a very important question. He says, now, he wanted to become many. He wanted to become many. He was one, but he wanted to become many. So he has become many, and we are that many. So we are not different from God. We are not different from God, but because he wanted to become many, so we have to become many. Now, thing is, when God wanted to become many, there must be some purpose behind this. Otherwise, why did he like to become many? Right? Why not just be one and be happy? Right? He says, that's all. He says, he was one without a second. And of course, that's still true. Everything that exists is still Krishna. We have that philosophy, the simultaneous oneness and difference. Everything is Krishna. But he differentiated. So why did he do that? Why did he become differentiated? So that is a question. One must put that. Why God became many? What's the purpose of that? Hmm? It's really interesting how he did this. And then he says, so that the answer is that because God is Satchit Ananda Vigraha. And then he goes on to explain even further. He says, he's all pleasure. Therefore, without many, there is no pleasure. Just like I sit here, just like here, I sit down the whole day alone, but I become more active and more pleasing when you come. Whenever we want to enjoy some pleasure, pleasure is not enjoyed alone. Pleasure is enjoyed with many. Now, God is by nature, he's Anandamayo Byashat, full of Ananda, full of bliss. So that was Krishna's purpose, is that there is something that can be attained that's beyond the state of oneness. He could just, and in the state of oneness, there's Atmarama, right? There's full satisfaction, right? In the material realms, we're not fully satisfied. We have kama desires, and we try to find happiness. At the stage of full atmarama, full satisfaction, there's shanti, there's peace, and there's no desires, no need for anything. So when Krishna differentiates, he makes the one you have still oneness, but it's differentiated, it has differences. His whole purpose was to increase bliss. So there's something beyond full satisfaction and peace. And here Prabhupada says in 337 in Bhagavad Gita's purport, he says, the Supreme Personality expanded himself into many for his ever increasing spiritual bliss. And the living entities are parts and parcels of this spiritual bliss. Okay? And so what this ultimately means, right, is the spiritual love. So this is what Krishna set out for himself. Right? This is why he is who he is, because Krishna can be anything. He is all of existence, and he can control everything. If he wanted a different kind of world, he could have a different kind of world. He's not a being inside a world. The world is part of his energy. He could be anything he wants. He could be different. He already has so many forms. He could be anything he wants, and he could have any world he wants. And so what you see him doing is how he is understood this is the highest type of pleasure that can happen, this Krishna prema. So the difference with the Vrindavan Leela is that the love is so strong and spontaneous that the devotee loses the mood and awe and awe and reverence for Krishna. He's just too sweet, and they just can't keep it. They're attracted to him just to be his friend or his servant or his parent or his lover. And so it just draws them. It's magnetic. And so Krishna's so personable. And they can't hold on to that feeling of Krishna being God. And so here Prabhupada explains in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, he says, in general, attachment to Krishna is of two kinds. The first kind is attachment with awe and veneration. Characterized by a lack of freedom, such attachment is exhibited in Mathura and on the Vaikuntha planets. In these abodes of the Lord, the flavor of transcendental loving service is restricted. But in Gokul, Vrindavan, love is freely exchanged. And although the cowherd boys and damsels of Vrindavan know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Prabhupada usually doesn't say this, but this is true. Usually because right, he says they know that the cowherd boys and damsels of Vrindavan know that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. They do not show awe and veneration because of the great intimacy of their relationship with him through thick and thin. So generally, Prabhupada says that they don't know that Krishna is God. But there's some nuance to that, and he hints at that here. We'll discuss that a little bit more from some things from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. He gives it some more dynamics on that. So in the five principal transcendental relationships, awe and veneration are sometimes impediments to one's service to the Lord, because you feel, what can you do for him? When there is friendship, parental affection, or conjugal love, such awe and veneration are impediments. For example, when Krishna appeared as the son of Vasudeva and Devaki, they prayed to the Lord with awe and veneration because they understood that the Supreme Lord Krishna or Vishnu had appeared before them as their child. And so in this comes from the Ragavartma Chandrika. It's a work by a small work by Srila Vishwanath Chakrabarti Thakur, and he explains this dynamic and takes it even a little further. He says Yashoda shows not a trace of decrease in her vatsalya, her parental love, being consoled by the words of Nanda. This is after the Govardhan Leela, and afterwards the cowherd men are discussing, who is this kid to lift that mountain like that. And he eventually comes to the conclusion, right, that Gargamuni basically told him that he's God. And so I guess he must have told Yashoda that. But says Yashoda shows not a trace of decrease in her parental love after Nanda tells her that rather her affection for her son became stronger. For joyfully she thought that it is fortunate that the Lord is my son. Similarly, in the material world, a mother's love for her son remains strong, though he is master of the earth. The cowherd boys think we are fortunate that the Lord is our friend. The gopis strengthen their love, thinking we are fortunate that the Lord is our lover. So it says that that in the other, like in Dwarka or in Mathura, there sometimes is a flip. So like when Krishna is born, I think that was they're spoken about in the when Prabhupada's quote from the teachings of Lord Chaitanya. First of all, he appears as Lord Vishnu, right? And they say, you've come to kill Kamsa. And then very strangely, in the next verse, they say, please hide yourself because Kamsa is going to come and kill you. So they flipped and they went into parental love where they have to protect him. And it happens to them also when Krishna kills Kamsa. They approach him afterwards with, like folded hands, and because he killed Kamsa, obviously he's somebody divine. And so Krishna and Balaram, they try to confuse them. They say, "Oh, our dear parents, we weren't any kind of good children for you. We couldn't do any service for you because of fear of Kamsa. We ran away from you. We haven't been able to serve you." And it switches their mood. And so the next thing they have these full grown children sitting on their laps and they're smelling their hair. And another time it happens is when the residents of Dwarka, the residents of Hastinapur, and the residents of Vrindavan all meet at Kurukshetra. And at one point, the great sages come from the higher planets, and they say how Krishna is God. And so when Krishna and Vasudeva go back to Dwarka, the next morning, Krishna comes and bows down before his father like he always does. Right? And Vasudeva says, no, I know who you are. You're not my son, you're God. And Krishna manages to kind of bewilder him and get him back into the parental mood. But so when for them, whenever they realize Krishna is God, it breaks the mood. You're not my son. You're not this. Where Yashoda and the Vrijvasis, when they know that Krishna is God, they just think, wow, my friend is God. It just deepens it. And Vishwanath, he says that that they never know that when they meet Krishna because he's just too sweet. He says, moreover, on meeting Krishna, no awareness of his powers manifests because meeting creates coolness. He says, like the light of the moon. So when they're present with him, he's just too sweet. And so they even can't remember that then. But he says, in separation, awareness of his powers appears because that generates heat like the light of the sun. However, if there is no trembling of the heart or great reverence, if there is no trembling of the heart or great reverence and respect, it cannot be called knowledge of his powers. So it doesn't affect them. So they know he's God, but they think, oh, my friend is God. And it doesn't break their mood of spontaneous love. All right. So that's what's required. No, and that he mentions here, this is part of which captivates them. He says, sweetness is now defined. He says, whether great powers manifest or do not manifest, when Krishna does not transgress human pastimes, it is called sweet. For instance, though he sucked out the life air of Putana, he performed the pastimes of a human child. by sucking her breast. In breaking the very tough cart, he showed the infant pastime of lying down and kicking up his very soft feet of 3 months. So, like even in Vrindavan, so many times when Krishna it exhibits his supernatural powers, he does it in a sweet way. He doesn't like he said he could have just destroyed Putin in a more violent way, but he just sucks her breasts. He looks like a sweet little child, or he kicks his little soft feet against the Shaktasura cart, or even with Indra, he had the power just to order Indra to go away. He had the power. He could take Indra's power away from him. He could make him unable to produce control the rains. But instead, he lifts up the Govardhan hill and lets the rains come. So he does it in kind of a sweet way. And so that also helps to keep the mood, you know. He doesn't show his full power in some ways. He shows just enough to get it done, and it's done in kind of a sweet way that's kind of human-like still, even though it's miraculous. Yeah? So he keeps the mood that way. So yeah, and for this reason, being simply overcome with Krishna's sweetness without any intimidation that comes from Krishna being God. Prabhupada says that there's a purport on Jaya Radha Madhava, where he says that the residents of Vrindavan, he says they may or may not know who Krishna is, but it doesn't affect them. And so he says that he says whatever he may be, he says they don't think of him as God. And so he says if you think that here Krishna is God, therefore I will serve him. He says this is not unalloyed. Because when we think that here's Krishna and we're his eternal servants, therefore I should serve him or I need to serve him, that's not quite pure. It's not really selfish, but it's not pure attraction. It's like, okay, this is my dharma. This is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I was created to do. And so the love isn't as powerful in that case. And so he said that this is why Srila Jiva Goswami, he says that this is true of the residents of Dwarka and Vaikuntha, that their love is a little bit diminished by their knowledge of his opulence, because it's an obligation, right? He's God, you're the eternal servant, and therefore you should and must serve. And they do it happily, they have love for him, but in some sense it's obligatory. It's not just flowing from the heart. And so by being absorbed in his sweetness and not having that affect his power and majesty affect them at all, the Vajrasis are able to love him with every fiber of their being. And there's no even slight inhibition there. So Krishna receives this powerful kind of love that's the sweetest possible thing that attracts him, right? It says Krishna Prema is Krishna Karshni. It actually attracts Krishna. Prabhupada goes further and says it controls him. You'll say it like that sometimes. All right. So now Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says something that I haven't found Prabhupada say. My feeling is that Prabhupada was very careful that he always would remind us that even when Krishna is a little child and playing, seeming like a little baby, he's God. And he always because with the impersonalists, they think that anything that comes from the one, any form, is immediately something less. And so Prabhupada was always very careful to say that Krishna in any condition is always God. Okay? But the situation with Krishna is similar with the devotees. Right? Because Krishna not only wants to be loved, Prabhupada mentions that it's fully reciprocal. He becomes a devotee of his devotees. So Krishna not only wants to be loved, that's only one side of the equation. He wants to love with all his heart, right? If you ask anybody, what would you rather do? Have people love you with all their hearts? You love someone with all your heart, or do you want both? And you're going to pick both. And Krishna is not going to miss out on anything. So, but Krishna has this problem, right? He is God. He is different from everybody else, right? So by his sweetness, people, especially the residents of Braj, forget about that. And so they love him very intimately and very sweetly, right? But if Krishna knows that he's so superior to them, how can he, and he can be touched by their love, but how can he love them with all his heart? If he thinks they're just little specks of me. So Krishna, what he wants to do is to become a real person that can have real relationships. That's the highest level of ecstasy when he wants to become such an vigraha. And so therefore something, according to Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, really amazing happens. And he explains how it happens. So I think Prabhupada didn't want to confuse us with this. But so this is his argument. He says this comes from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first canto, 8 chapter, text 31. It's the prayers of Queen Kunti. Queen Kunti is speaking here. She says, "My dear Krishna, Yashoda took up a rope to bind you when you committed an offense, and your perturbed eyes overflooded with tears, with which washed the mascara from your eyes. And you were afraid, though fear personified is afraid of you. This sight is bewildering to me." Okay? And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, we would not say that she was bewildered if Krishna was only pretending. Saying that fear itself fears Krishna shows that she has Aishvarya, she knows his mother's opulence. So she knows who Krishna is. And so that's why she says fear itself fears Krishna. But he says the word bhaya, bhavanaya, sitasya, that you were afraid, indicate that the internal fear was real. If you were only pretending, Kunti would not have been bewildered. She's a great devotee. Why would she think, okay, Krishna's he's just play acting, right? All right. So he says that can't be true. And so then he explains it carefully. He says, if Krishna is not aware that he is the Lord while he's in Vrindavan, how can the Lord, who is eternally knowledge and bliss in its highest form, have an eternal covering on his knowledge? Right? And Prabhupada mentioned, right, that Krishna can never be covered by Maya. Right? And that's true. Vishwanath Chakravarti mentions this here. He says, just as avidya, the function of Maya, covers the knowledge of the jiva in order that he experience suffering in samsara, and just as yoga Maya, a function of the Chit Shakti, covers the knowledge of Yashoda and others who are associates of Krishna, though they are beyond the gunas, in order that they experience the happiness of his sweet pastimes. So prema, the essence of the Chit Shakti, covers Krishna's knowledge. So no Maya, but his prema covers Krishna's knowledge so that he can experience the greatest bliss, which is his very Swarupa. He says there is no fault in Krishna for such covering, since prema is his self, his real self, his Swarup Shakti. And then he goes on and he says, in any case, the jiva under the control of avidya suffers. Krishna under the control of prema enjoys great happiness. One should consider that when Krishna is overcome with prema, it gives him a special type of happiness, just as the bee derives special happiness by being covered by the lotus petals. So Krishna, out of his own desire for the greatest happiness, he becomes so captivated by the love of his devotees that he doesn't feel like he can feel even dependent upon them. Prabhupada sometimes says that he, in the same purport on Jaya Radha Madhava, he says that Krishna likes to be chastised by his devotees. So he wants to feel like he's a person too. And you can imagine, okay, if he feels that he can feel dependent on his mother. That's how he can be afraid of her. That's how he can feel like when she puts him down in the Damodar Lila, when she goes to take care of the milk that's boiling over. Krishna's hungry. Right? He feels he needs her and she's leaving him. And when she's there and providing for him, he can feel like a child feels towards his mother. If he knows who he is, he can't feel that way. He can't love to that extent. He can feel dependent. And so it allows him to love to his fullest extent. So Krishna goes through all this trouble to go from oneness to many, into a place where he can experience life in some ways as just a being. that can love. Now, what Vishnu goes on to say is he says, thus Krishna, overcome by Vatsalya and other types of prema, when in contact with the people of Braj, does not know that he is the Lord. When his omniscience is manifest at the time of a demon approaching or during the forest fire, it manifests by the Lila Shakti in order to protect his associates and their prema. So when he needs to do it, he does it. There's no problem. And of course, the thing that's happening there is that he has his dear servant, Yoga Maya, organizing the Leela. Right? Purnamasi is organizing the Leela. So Krishna is in a safe place. If he's not if he's not controlling things directly. And so if Krishna isn't acting on his he is omniscient and he is omnipotent, but if he's not acting on that, if he's dealing with just with the Leela, he can be anxious. When will he see Radharani again? Right? When he's separated from Radharani, if he's aware of his full power, he can create millions of Radharanis. he can make, if Jatila is causing him trouble, he can put her to sleep just like he did the guards in Kamsa's prison. But instead, he feels like, how can I see Radharani? How can I see her? And so he's allowed to have a real life, right? He's God, therefore he can't have it. When he's God, he can't have a real life. And of course, for us, we'd rather be God because things are so crazy here. If we could be omniscient and omnipotent, our lives would increase. But in a safe place, like Vrindavan, being God means, it's boring a little bit. Omniscience and omnipotence gets boring because at the heart, Krishna is already Atmarama, fully satisfied. So, we would like to be omnipotent so we could get all the enjoyable things we want. But he's already, at the very least, he's fully satisfied. So what does he care? So his only thing is to love, and to love completely, he has to be able to be absorbed in the Leela himself and feel like he's their friend, like he's their son. He has to be able to feel that. Then his love can flow fully from his heart. So this is the miracle that happens with Krishna. That's why he becomes many, and why he becomes many in that way. So this thing in Vrindavan is the full level of his self-realization. Okay. So we'll stop there. And the next couple of times I want to try to talk about how we can, from where we are in our very beginning stage. We're not going to talk about Raganuga Sadhana Bhakti, where the devotees understand the sadhakas, understand Krishna's their specific relationship with Krishna and that kind of stuff. That's for something else. But we're going to talk about how we, from our condition now, can develop some raga. Not raga. Raga anuga means you have this real attraction for Krishna, but you have it in a very specific mood that is not just your concoction. It's like if we just read this, I want to be a gopi, I want to be a cowherd, but that doesn't mean anything. That's just our mental speculation, and that puts us in the sahaja mood. But there's a time and a place when that realization comes powerfully from us, from inside. We know that's who we are. And then the raga nuga means that you take inspiration from the ragatmaka, the eternal associates, in that mood. It's not just something we casually choose and I'm going to do that. That's because we don't understand the mood. We don't even understand the love. So we have to develop raga first, and to be a very high level to be able to understand the specific relationships. Prabhupada was always like, he didn't like it when people just tried to listen to Krishna Lila, because he knew that we didn't have that underlying understanding. We see it with our material eyes. So we can't just pick something off the wall and say, I want to be a cowherd boy. And so now I'm going to read all the cowherd boy pastimes. And we don't know. Right now, we're Anishtas Sadhana Bhaktas. We have to go through a whole bunch of other stuff before we can even think about that. We're dreaming if we're thinking like that. And we don't have the proper understanding of how those relationship works. So we have to develop some raga, some actual attachment first, to get us through the Anishta Sadhana Bhakti, the Nishta to Ruchi, and then maybe at Asakti we can begin to understand something. But for us to just kind of choose, that looks good, it's probably because that's Sahajaism. He was very upset. There were people that were he called the Gopi Baba Club. We were just reading about the pastimes in the Gopi in his books. But so we can hear about that. That's fine. But we can't set our hearts on that because we just don't have. We don't have. Where's our raga, first of all? much less raga nuga. We're just, we're dreaming. We're just dreaming and think that way. So there'll be a time when that, Papa says, there's a time when that will come out, that we'll know that it'll be for real. It won't be just like as when now we're okay, Hare Krishna. We're all distracted and stuff. And we're like, oh, I'm going to be a gopi. Not going to work for us, man. So we're going to try to talk in the next couple of classes about how we can start to develop a little bit of raga, and how the two things, the understanding of Krishna's power and his sweetness, are so important for the sadhakas. We need both of those things, and they act in different ways, and so they have to come together. So it's not that if we want to develop raga, that we ignore Krishna's power, because as we find, as we see, even the residents from Vrindavan know it in the background, because all of the rasas, they have the component of shanta. Then when it's dasya, then there's that shanta, then there's servitorship. Then when there's friendship, there's shanta, servitorship, and friendship. And Vatsalya, you see, it builds on that. So there's always the background. There's that. There's that. In some way, there's that shanta. It's part of all the rasas, and that comes from knowing Krishna's power. So we it's not that now in cultivation of our sadhana we're just going to try to grab onto the sweetness. That will not work, because it's with the knowledge of his power and majesty that we develop a certain steadiness. So we're going to talk about the interrelationship of those things, and so it's really necessary to further cultivate both of those things. A greater taste and attachment with the background of that. We're not ready to go into the Vrindavan thing where it goes far into the background. That will not help us at this point. We can't do that. So are there any let me see, we'll stop the share here. Any comments or questions? I mean, is it everything's as clear as mud? All right. Then so yeah, that's be the next two things we'll talk about. How we as devotees far away from this can put ourselves on a path that's moving in that direction, and some of the considerations there. And so we'll see. All right.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Well,
Very nicely explained. Thank you.
Yeah, so it's really amazing that Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur there. He really gives in such interesting detail. And so I was really happy to see Prabhupada say in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya that they actually know. That they actually know the cacao herb, because usually he says that they don't, because that's the mood that they have, But he does say that in that particular case, and but just it doesn't interfere with them. It doesn't interfere with their mood like it does in the other places. All right. Well.